All right, welcome to the Our Experience podcast, an ASCP podcast. I'm Chad Wurz, CEO of ASCP, joined by my partner, Tom Hansel, and we're going to do another topic, a segment that we call Rage Against the Machine, talking about some of the processes and procedures in long-term care pharmacy. And this is particularly an interesting one because we're going to be talking about ways to improve revenue, which I think everybody that works on the business side of long-term care pharmacy is interested in revenue and profit. So we're going to kick it off and talk about short cycle dispensing, and I'll turn it over to Tom.
No, thanks, Chad. This is kind of a topic that's near and dear to my heart because I started doing this several years ago, and I also was resistant to short cycle, and it was a change. You know, you grow up doing pharmacy a certain way, and you master that way, and I had a lot of success doing it a certain way, and then all of a sudden there was a required change or forced change.
It's funny to think about it because, like, to your point, people started probably, way back at a 30-day supply kind of routine. I'm sure before even the dawning of managed care, you probably got more than that. You got whatever the doctor ordered from a prescription standpoint. But then we got locked into this sort of everything has to be monthly. And nobody really thought about, well, does that make any sense? Especially in a transitional environment where, the average length of stay in a nursing home is 21 to 25 days. So, giving a dispensing in 30 days sometimes doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now,
Absolutely.
Hospitals, would have a daily card exchange that they would be dispensing on a day-by-day basis. It's not that level either. But to your point, we get locked into these sort of concepts, and sometimes it makes sense to take a step back, look at it, and come up with more efficient ways to deliver meds. So I'm sure you're going to tell us the origins of this and where it happened.
Well, absolutely, and you're right. You kind of get into that routine, but this really all started or originated back with Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, which was in 2010. And Obamacare by no means put in pharmacies have to do short cycle, but they did have a provision that was aimed at increasing or improving the quality of care in nursing homes, specifically around med management and helping to decrease admissions. And if you remember around 2010, that's really when starting acute rehab wings was starting to be a thing. Up until the early 2000s, it was truly a long-term stay. Everybody that came in a nursing home was planning on staying there for the remainder.
As a rest home.
As a rest home for the remainder of their life. That's right. And then nursing homes, due to changes in reimbursement and revenue and opportunities and looking for new creative ways to increase their revenue, started doing rehab units. And that's now you see an average length of stay at a nursing center is not 30 days. It's less than that. And so short cycle is becoming more and more relevant. But back in 2010, when Affordable Care Act came out, CMS had their orders of trying to improve quality care and decrease readmissions. And so they started testing different theories and different payment delivery models. And I believe they hired some groups to do that. But one of the things that they tested through one of these companies was that short cycle was an opportunity to decrease cost. A lot of waste. One of the problems with this study, though, is they just took a few states. From what I remember, they just took a few states, and one of them was Georgia. And Georgia is a non-return state. So once that bingo card or that medication comes to that nursing center and one pill is removed, you can't send it back to the pharmacy.
Once you buy a Val, it's yours to keep.
It's yours to keep. It's yours forever. And so you see a high as the turnover, because acuity goes up and the rehab starts going up, the turnover starts happening more and more for the patients and bigger waste. But the problem with that study was a lot of states do allow to return, and you can return that 3 or 4 or 5 days left in that bingo card and get some money back for the pills. And so there were some issues there. And then the second issue, after this came out and being debated hotly from 2010 through 2012, was that pharmacies came back and said, wait, you want me to now send a short cycle, a 7-day supply. So instead of doing this one time a month, you want me to do this 4 times a month. My costs are going to go crazy. I'm going to have to send a 7-day pills, but I'm going to have to do that 4 times a month, and not to mention the waste in consumables and the back and forth. And so CMS conceded a little bit at the time. They said, I tell you what, let's just cap it out at 14-day on brand, and then we're going to and we're not going to do anything with generics right now, but we're going to relook at all of this. I don't know if they have since then, because I haven't really heard much, but that was kind of their end decision at that time.
Yeah, I think it's typical government thought process around how can we lower costs. They always come up with harebrained ideas that may or may not be effective. I remember those days of dealing with what potentially was coming with short cycle, the negotiation around, well, let's just do it for brand, because obviously in their mind, that's where all the expense is in the brand. Right. And then dealing with things like, well, some products you can't break down into 14 days. Like if it's an inhaler or a vial, like you can't break that down. So this is really just for solid oral tablets and capsules. So, it's interesting. But I also think it's interesting, the whole return thing, because that always resonates with anybody that doesn't understand long-term care, because they're like, well, just send back what you didn't use and we'll reuse it. But that for a pharmacy is another touch, another handling. There's a cost to it. It's not just simply return it and we throw it back in a giant bin, and then when we want to use it, we pull it back out of the giant bin.
Right.
So a lot of effort was put in, I think, from a short cycle perspective to see, okay, we're going to get it. How do we make it work on the pharmacy side? And is it an advantage and truly provide benefit?
Certainly. Yeah, and I remember when we were facing this decision and we knew what CMS was looking at, and that threat, if you will, was real. To do things 4 times a month was not a go-forward plan. And we thought, man, we can't do that. And so we started looking at technology, specifically compliance adherence pouch packaging, multi-dose pouch packaging. And so this actually relates right back to ASCP. Fond memory that I had is we had purchased the first machine. We had trained up the first nursing home in Georgia that we were going to go ahead and convert. We were preparing for that we were going to do short cycle for all the medications. And we were at the annual ASCP meeting over in National Harbor. And this is at 2012. And we sat there watching the election. And it was Mitt Romney versus Barack Obama. And we thought, if Barack wins, Affordable Care Act's going through, we're going to have to do this. But if Mitt wins, man, we're not doing this. We're pulling the plug. We're sending the machine back, and we're not.
That's hilarious.
So we sat there and we watched the election. Like the next morning, like, okay, pilot, go live. Right. We're sending messages down from DC, going, I guess we're go. In retrospect, I'm so thankful that that's the way it happened, because it truly saved my thought process in what is good pharmacy care. In my opinion, I've been able to. We converted all 100 of our nursing centers, and just the success that we had from that was pretty phenomenal. One of my favorite stories is our very first home that we did in North Carolina, and we didn't pick the first homes in each state just by drawing out a hat. We selectively picked well-ran homes. This is a good administrator. Her name was Linda Reese, and great DON, and we thought, okay, this is a well-managed home. We know that it's going to be successful here. And if you think about converting a nursing center from a 30-day bingo card or blister card over to a 7-day cycle fill pouch, you have to kind of count them down. So at 14 days before the cycle, you're sending the 14 pills. In 10 days, you're sending the 10 pills, right?
I remember that.
So you're slowly counting them down. But then you're going to have a night where you flip that med cart, and there's 2 ways to do that. You either bring in new med carts with a 3-inch drawers versus those deep 6-inch drawers, or you do a conversion kit where you gut the med cart out and all that kind of stuff. Well, this is the first one we did in North Carolina, and being a VP, I wanted to be highly involved in this initial initiative. So I was the one that brought the med carts in, and it's getting them prepared. And of course, we bought brand new med carts in. And I remember, so I was in the cafeteria, probably around 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon, preparing for the midnight swap. And again, being the first one, this was still very, very, very new. And I'm just in my own little world, and I'm, getting med carts ready or whatever. And all of a sudden I hear, is that new pharmacy system? man, this is going to be the end of me. I'm just going to retire. And I look up, and there's this little 4'11", probably 60-something-year-old nurse that was just sitting there with her hands on her, and just shaking her head. And I said,
she's a change agent.
yeah. I know this might be hard to believe, but some nurses might be a little resistant to change. And so being in her 60s and getting off her day shift, she was just like, and that's the first thing she said. And I looked up and I said, what's your name? She goes, I ain't telling you my name. And I said, well, my name's Tom. Come over here. Let me show you these med carts. And so I was kind of going through and see, here's how it is. You just have to open that morning pouch and, just all the advantage and everything. The entire time I was talking, she was sitting there just
arms crossed.
And she never said a word, just shaking her head, for like 5 minutes. And I said, and I noticed on her tag, it was Pat. And I said, well, Miss Pat, I said, come back tomorrow for your shift. I said, I promise you it's going to be okay. So anyway, I did the cart conversion and everything, and I was gone before the morning shift, and my team was there. But about a month later, I walked in to the nursing home. I thought, it's been a few weeks. I'm going to check on them and see how they're doing. I walked in, and one of the first people I see work in the hall was Miss Pat. And she remembered me. And she goes, you ain't coming here to take my new pharmacy system away, are you? And I said, no, Miss Pat. I thought, she was going to, be all negative. I said, no, Miss Pat. I said, why? She goes, I love it. I love it. She said, I can't believe how easy it is. And I'm passing meds faster than I've ever done. I could never get all my meds past that 2-hour window. Man, I'm passing it, and I've got time to spare. She goes, it's one of the best things I've ever dealt with. And I thought, my goodness, this is it. If 60-year-old Miss Pat has been set in her ways for decades, if she can be converted that quick, we're doing the right thing. We're doing the right thing for the nurses. We're doing the right thing for for the home. And so I love telling that story, and I've had lots and lots of stories like that where there was resistance at first, but now they see it and enjoy it.
So there's still pharmacies today, I'm sure, that are not doing short cycle dispensing. It's always an adoption period. There's an investment that pharmacies have to make. There's probably a size where that makes more sense than not. But talk about where the rubber meets the road. How is that return on investment? How fast is that? How good is that for the pharmacy? Because I have to believe it's beneficial. I have to believe it's a win for the pharmacy.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. I like to actually start at the patient level.
Okay.
These are compliance adherence pouch packaging, which means it increases compliance and increases adherence. And, being pharmacist, I think our job is not to dispense drugs. I think our job is to help our patients be adherent.
Yep.
In any way that we can do that. And this is proven to increase adherence, to increase compliance, especially if they're still self-administering.
Yeah.
You've seen AL, IL patients, if they can stay independent longer, that's the right thing to do. And this increases compliance, increases adherence. So I think that's critical. Obviously, for the nursing home, it's a big deal. You're now having higher compliance. You're having decrease in rehospitalizations. You're having higher QM ratings. You're having higher 5-star ratings. Administrator loves it. DON loves it. It's a self-administrator, or it's a self-managing system. And what I mean by that, another one of my stories is that we were doing day one of a different nursing center, and we were doing day one. It was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. All of a sudden, a nurse comes to me and goes, well, Susie didn't pass her meds this morning. And I go, what do you mean? She goes, here, the 9 a.m. pouch is still here. Susie didn't pass her meds. All of a sudden, now the nurses are able to manage the other nurses. Did they or did they not give the meds?
Yeah.
And that was another thing that resonated with me. So I believe throughout the nursing home, in all aspects, from patient, DON, obviously decreasing med pass time, and that significantly, from my experience, I've seen close to a 30% reduction in med pass time. No company is gonna state that. There's research out there and studies out there that have shown 10 to 15%. My personal experience, I've seen 30% reduction in med pass time. And in a nursing shortage world, that's significant.
Yeah.
And as a pharmacy doing value add, trying to help our customers, being able to help that nursing shortage and being able to reduce their burden of passing meds, I think, again, we have to do it. It's the right thing to do. But back to your original question.
Let me before we go to that, the original question. There's a couple things in there I want to unpack.
Okay.
One, you talked about IL and independent living and assisted living. For sure, when we start thinking about the kinds of services that we apply to nursing homes and applying them to the people that live in the community, compliance and adherence is a major issue. And this is extraordinarily easy and beneficial for individuals that live at home. And even if it's, you talk about the nurses saying, hey, they didn't pass their 9 a.m. meds, we can see that in the nursing home. Well, you as a caregiver could see that at home with your mom or dad or their home and say, wow, like there's a couple strip pouches, that haven't been, consumed. And if you're a pharmacy taking on an acute patient that lives at home instead of the nursing home, it's also a method to try to track compliance and adherence. So I think that's an important concept. The other piece I wanted to touch on is we are in a massive staffing struggle, and there are already rumors and proposals out there that maybe the CNAs should be trained as med techs, or maybe we should have a designation of a med tech that helps the nurse because we're having trouble, staffing all of these activities. And the fact that we can pouch package the solid oral tablets and at least make that piece of it easier could be the differentiator in, hey, we've got med techs that do the pouch pack administration, and then we have the nurse that comes in and does the insulin, the inhaler, the more sophisticated things, and that could be a help from a staffing perspective. So that's, just another touch on that. But let's go to the pharmacy. Because they're the ones that have to, decide, hey, we want to invest in this. We think that this is a win for not only for all the reasons we talked about for patients and for nursing homes and for nurses, but what about the pharmacy?
Yeah, no, certainly. And I had the same fears. I thought, man, we've been doing it this way. We got the system figured out, if you will. And yet we're going to have to convert pretty dramatically. We're going to have to make a pretty significant change. We're going to have to add technology. If this is true, that decreasing waste, decrease costs, then we're going to have less revenue. And the exact opposite happened for us. I'll take you through a couple big things. First of all, you're adding a machine that is doing a lot of the manual, redundant labor of filling medications. If you think about a 30-day bingo card or blister card pharmacy, they can't possibly prepare that card and send it out that same day fast enough, which means they have to do a lot of pre-packing.
Yep.
And so you walk into a blister card pharmacy, and they've got rows and rows and rows of cash sitting on their shelf called pre-packs.
Yep.
So their cash, instead of being in their bank, is sitting on so it certainly helped our cash flow quite a bit. Then the quality. Now I've got a machine that's not only filling the medications, but it's also another machine that verifies that you got the right pills. So it's called a vision system, and as these vision system, what they do is they take a picture at a very high rate of every single pill, of every single pouch. They identify the size, the shape, the color, even the inscription. They'll see if there's a chip out of a tablet or an extra crumb, and it's going at such a high rate, the quality's significantly higher. But you're taking a picture and it's airing out, hey, there's a problem, I don't recognize this drug or whatever it is. You've worked pharmacy counters plenty of times, and you get almost blind after card after card after card after card gone. After 6-7 hours of that, my pharmacist loved it. They loved having that technology security that helped their license and protected them. And then we loved the fact that we were taking a picture of every pouch. So no more of those, I need to get those meds. Not only did you get them, but you want to see a picture of them? Right. I had the picture of the exact pill that you're saying you didn't get. So those complaints and calls went away. But my labor went way down just in PV2 because it's so more efficient. My PV2 expenses probably went down around 75%, which is pretty big, especially back in a pharmacist shortage world that we were in at the time. And we were able to repurpose our pharmacists to do a lot of other more cognitive functions, but our quality went up at the same time. So you can't really beat that. But I think really the best thing, even though labor got better and inventory got better, which is all very important, the best thing was reimbursement got significantly better. And what I mean by that is CMS encouraged, they couldn't mandate, but they encouraged PBMs to incentivize pharmacies to do short cycle.
Yep.
And the way that ended up happening was in the dispensing fee. So let's take a generic med, and if you're going to get reimbursed for generic med, about 90% of that reimbursement is in the dispensing fee. Only about 10% is in the ingredient cost.
Yeah.
There are all PBMs, I shouldn't say all, but most PBMs are reimbursing multiple dispensing fees. I'm talking 2, 3, several are doing 4 dispensing fees a month. Now think about that. I've just taken that 90% of my revenue and I multiply it times 4 times a month or 3 times a month.
Yep.
We saw our revenue take off. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars. We had a large pharmacy, but hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional revenue because we were getting paid multiple dispensing fees a month. The ROI was there 100 times over, and it was there quickly. And so I see that if pharmacies are kind of worried about, is this going to be the right thing for me financially, it's a no-brainer. We paid for the machines. We paid for the technology 10 times over.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to our last Rage Against the Machine when we talked about PBMs, and Antonio Chacha, the one piece of advice he was saying as we head into the end of this year is have cash available, because you're going to be dealing with this DIR shift and this anomaly that's going to happen in January, and this, we're about 6 months away from that. This is the time to make this kind of investment, especially from your perspective, if it reduces that inventory load and saves your cash. Obviously, when you buy machines, it's an outlay, but typically those are financed and you can control your cash. So it's interesting that those concepts have come up in these last 2 episodes, but I just immediately thought of that, in addition to the fact that if somebody's going to pay you 4 times for something they used to pay you 1 time for, that's a huge opportunity. And you're not taking advantage of it because ultimately you're saving them money. But instead of outlaying, even if it's a generic drug, instead of sending 4 times the amount out there and risking that order is going to change or that med's going to be DC'd, you're only sending 7 days out, or some short cycle. And I know a lot of pharmacies are even more aggressive. Now, they may not get 5 and 6 dispensing fees a month, but they figured out that sending a 3-day supply. There are actually long-term care pharmacies out that do a day over day exchange for their skilled residents. So, I mean, there are efficiencies that this technology brings that are monumental in terms of the business of pharmacy.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer when you look at the ROI. I think the main resistance is due to change. Pharmacies don't like to change any better than the nurses like to change, and so I like to say this: it's a simple decision in my opinion, but it's not easy. So it's a simple thing to do, but it's not an easy thing to do. You really have to have a culture change inside your pharmacy a little bit, and then depending on the part of the country you're in, it could be pretty significant. If you're in Chicago or you're in Georgia, you really can't do long-term care without offering some kind of compliance pouch packaging. But there's other states that have resisted it, and the main pharmacy players there have resisted it. I believe that if a pharmacy says, "Man, I'm gonna go after this. I'm gonna go pioneer this in my state," I think they're going to be very successful. And from my experience, that's what happened to us. We started converting our own centers, and then this became popular. All of a sudden, we were adding customers left and right. And every pharmacy had to follow suit. Every pharmacy had to adopt what we were doing because we led the charge, and we pioneered that. And I think if a pharmacy does that in the states that are strictly or almost strictly unit dose blister, I think they can pick up a lot of business very quickly.
Yep. And that's part of what this podcast is about, is trying to make sure we have a healthy industry and a competitive industry, because those two things working together raise the level of the tide for everybody in pharmacy, particularly long-term care pharmacy. Why would some of those pharmacies be so resistant?
Well, I've been doing it this way for 30 years. I'm going to continue doing it. I think they have they don't have the competition incentivizing them. There's no thorn in their side to force it to happen, if you will. And we were a little more pioneering. It was still new. We had a lot of bugs to work out, and it worked out in our favor. But when I think about this, I kind of use that analogy, that conspiracy theory, whatever you call it, about the frog in boiling water. you've heard this where, and this isn't true, but if you have boiling water and you put a frog in it, it'll jump right out. But if you have cold water, temper water, and you put a frog in, then you turn the unit up, it'll just sit there and get accustomed to its surroundings. And as the heat rises, it won't jump out, and then
it dies.
It'll die.
Boils. Yeah,
because it boils. Now that's not true. When
right.
That's, I don't know how that myth got started, but that's the analogy I think of is, why do something if I don't have to do it? And through my experience, I was in the same boat. I didn't want to do it. I felt like we had to do it because CMS. But in retrospect, looking back, I'm so thankful that we did it. And I spent most of my career really encouraging pharmacies and helping to get them into the right technology, because I think it's the right thing to do for everyone involved. Most importantly, the patient, then the nurse, and the nursing center, and then of course the pharmacy and the revenue and the labor and all the struggles there. To me, there's no one that's at a disadvantage. I think it'll end up being more and more common. I would guess around 35% of long-term care pharmacies do compliance pouch packaging now. Or there's also compliance multi-dose blister cards.
Yep.
And that's certainly this very similar strategy. And good technology out there that successfully does that well. So I'm not discounting the multi-dose blister cards. I just have more familiarity with the pouch personally. But I think that there's more and more customers and expectations. And then one last thing is, this is really the future because of long-term care at home.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to qualify as a long-term care at home pharmacy if you don't have some kind of compliance packaging, whether it's multi-dose blister or multi-dose pouch. And that's where 70 million people are going to be at. It is going to be at home, and you have to do compliance packaging.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're ever in the position to say this is how you have to do it. But I think when you look at the evolution of pouch packaging, there are multiple companies that build machines that pouch package. You have custom machines out there that do some version, as you mentioned, of multi-dose, whether it's a pouch or whether it's some sort of card. So it's coming, and certainly I think no one would suggest that it's a good idea to send somebody 8, 10, 12 blister cards to their house as a way to sort of have them manage their medications. I don't think anybody would agree with that. And I think when you look at bigger picture things like Amazon entering the space, that created a lot of fear and certainly makes an impact. Oh my gosh, Amazon's going to be they entered the space with pouch packaging. And I always thought of them, I don't think of them this way, but I always would think back to the automobile, and Henry Ford, gets credit for, the automobile when he really didn't invent the automobile. He invented the process to make it accessible to people. Amazon didn't invent the pouch pack. When they came to market, everybody's like, oh, wow, Amazon, look, they have this pouch packet. I'm like, we've had this pouch packet forever in long-term care. Like, this isn't new. Yeah. But they're making it more broadly available to people. They're exposing it more to the broad community. Again, that doesn't mean they're going to take over the world, but it does make it easier for that long-term care pharmacy that says, oh, we have a version of the pouch packet, and we can send it to you at your house. And this is how we roll it into our strategy to make sure you're safe with your medications. So I think, to your point, it's coming. It's going to be more ubiquitous. I'm actually surprised that only 25 or 30% of pharmacies in long-term care use pouch packaging. Even if it's not multi-dose, it surprises me because it seems such a natural progression.
Yeah, I think some of your more populated states have not moved in that direction of multi-dose. New York, California, West Coast, and in Texas. And I think that's probably where that's coming from. But again, you go to Florida, it's very common. You go to Georgia, you go to Chicago, you go to some parts of the Midwest, you really can't do business there if you don't have that option. So it is very state specific.
And another thing you brought up, I think, is interesting. I mean, you think of innovation, you think of the little guy that comes up with a new way of doing it, and then it kind of catches wildfire. Well, it's not easy to do that with high-end technology. You have to be able to buy into that. You have to have a bigger business to support that. So, your smaller combo shop pharmacy might not be able to invest in a machine that pouch packages if they're going to enter the long-term care space. So they're going to do some of the older, maybe at face value, at low volume, less expensive option. So to your point, it takes the big entity almost, or the mid-size entity in the market to say, I'm going to do this, to put pressure on everybody else, until that technology does become inexpensive enough where somebody that services 200 nursing home beds can buy a machine and deliver it that way and be the little one in the area that's like, oh, they got this new thing. I'm entering a market where the bigger, older pharmacies have not been quite as innovative, and now I'm taking business, which then in turn makes those bigger, older pharmacies say, wait, we're losing business now because we haven't adopted this. Maybe we need to adopt this. So it's an interesting market.
Yeah, I've got some good friends that I respect that know just as much about long-term care pharmacy that I know. They're colleagues of mine, and they prefer to do it the way they've been doing it for the last 20, 30 years, and they're successful at it. So it's not that you can't be successful at it. Again,
right?
Probably 65-7% of pharmacies are still offering that. But I just know that there's a lot of advantages to it, and I think that we can really continue providing higher and higher quality of service to our patients, to our customers, our nursing homes, and then to the public at large.
Well, this is awesome. Another Rage Against the Machine revenue opportunity this time for pharmacy. So I'm thrilled that our podcast can start sharing some of those really tangible strategies that help the industry get better and be better. So, Tom, thanks for sharing all of that.
Absolutely. Glad to do it. Enjoy it.
And we'll see everybody next time on Our Experience. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.